Gross domestic product rose 2.6% during fourth quarter, according to numbers released moments ago by the Commerce Department. Analysts were expecting a higher 3%, and this is much less than third quarter's 5%. For reaction, I'm joined on set by Steve Blitz, chief economist at ITG. So Steve, certainly, not a great reading here, but not a terrible one. Give us your take.
Well, there's a couple of things. First off, when you look at quarter-to-quarter numbers, there's a tremendous amount of volatility just from things like a lot of defense spending in the third quarter. You weren't going to grow another 16% in defense spending in the fourth quarter, and that was already giving you a negative bias to the quarter. When you look at the underlying number, though, when you look at it on a year-over-year basis, final sales to domestic producers in 2013 was essentially the same as it was in 2012. We are reverting and showing our core rate of growth of around 2.5%.
Now, of course, with every piece of economic data, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the Fed's rate hike plans. Will these disappointing numbers make an even stronger case that the Fed should delay a rate hike?
Well, I think they already know that they're going to delay it till September. I think they're uncertain as to whether they're going to do June or September, but I think they're leaning a little bit more towards September. And I think, first of all, I think they knew this number anyway when they met earlier in the week, or they had a preliminary guesstimate from Commerce on it. And what they saw in this number was telegraphed in the statement. When in the statement they said, everyone's pointing to, well, growth is solid. But the key thing is, in the December statement, they said growth is, and in this statement, they said growth has been. And that told me, that shift from an active present to a more passive past tense terms told me that they're not really sure what growth is going to be. Now, when you dissect the fourth quarter GDP numbers, you have, like I said, the swing in defense spending and all that. You have deflation, outright deflation in goods, non-durable and durable goods, which help boost the real growth number for consumption. So when you look underneath it all, you see a slowdown in investment spending by businesses. So it tells you that for the year ahead, you need consumers to spend. They need to spend this so-called gas tax cut. That's number one. Number two, you need spending on housing. And if you don't get that, it's going to be very tough to get 3% growth out of this economy in 2015.
Well, let's talk about your outlook for 2015. Is there anything specific you're looking at? We've had a great run the past 3 quarters, but what are you looking at the rest of the year?
For the rest of the year, we're still looking for 3% growth. And we're looking for it on the basis of 2 things. One, we think that you're going to get a very good spring quarter for house spending, building of houses and new home buying. Everything is set up for that as long as consumers don't lose their confidence, and based on all the recent surveys, they certainly have confidence going into the year. So I would expect a good housing, 6 months. That's number one. Number two, the slowdown in federal spending and state and local government spending should reverse and be a positive to GDP in 2015, which will also add. And those 2 things alone should get enough growth to get us to a 3% year in 2015.
All right, finally, let's talk about wages. The employment cost index was also released this morning. It rose 0.6% during fourth quarter, compared to 0.7% in third quarter. So, of course, wage growth is still not there.
No, it's not, and it's not for a whole host of reasons, and one of which is that we are a global economy. And even though, even your wage, they could do what you do someplace else in the world, and they could, if your wage got too high. So even the actual threat of import, or the threat of doing it overseas, keeps wage growth lower. And what's happening in the rest of the world? You have lower prices, you have slower growth, you have a surplus of labor everywhere in the world. So unless you have a very unique skill, where you probably have been seeing some decent wage growth over the last several years, for the broad average of people, you don't. And that's going to keep it down. The same rules of looking at growth and unemployment and what that means for wages as if we are still within this domestic-only container is a mistake.
All right, Steve Blitz, Chief Economist at ITG. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you.
I'm Scott Gamm, and you're watching The Street.